show you that ultimately we create our day, and we are the ones who determine, not let outside forces or external conditions determine, but we make the decision that it's going to be a great day. And I think that you have said yes to that. It's reminded us so eloquently this morning. You said yes to that, and you can come here to experience that. And as we do each month, we have a theme. Our theme this month is back to school, since we felt like we kind of get into the attitude of what is happening with so many people who are in one way or another affiliated with school, not only students, and we bless our students and continue to bless them, our teachers and administrators and parents and grandparents and loved ones all have an investment in school. And today, we're talking about faith. Faith. Gotta have faith, being one of the other basics of our teaching, one of the other basics of our belief. And so often when people talk about faith, they talk about faith or the faith in God, as opposed to the faith of God. Faith in God, as opposed to the faith of God. Now, it might seem to you like it's just, difference in semantics or difference in one word, in as opposed to of. But it's much more than that. That when we talk about faith in God, it means we objectify God. It means we make God a noun. As I talked about last week, we make God something outside of ourselves, and we are believing in something outside of ourselves when we talk about faith in God. And what happens is that we get caught up in that, and we objectify God, we put God outside of ourselves, so God can be experienced in one place, but maybe not in another place, and people go places to find God, or go places to experience God, and miss God in the process. Because on the way there, God was already there. So the faith in God is different, and one of the things that it reminds me of is that one of my favorite stories growing up that my father used to preach, one of the stories from the Bible, was a story that we call the Good Samaritan. And I'm sorry, not the Good Samaritan, but the woman at the well. It was the Samaritan woman that the master teacher Jesus was talking to. And she had a conversation with him, and Jesus was talking to her about experiencing God and all of that. And she said, well, our ancestors said that we worship God on the mountain, and I know that you Jews worship God in the temple. And Jesus said, simply, the time has come to gain a new understanding that God is spirit. And we don't worship God just on the mountain or just in the temple, but ultimately everywhere we experience God. God is spirit. And understanding God, encountering God, experiencing God is everywhere. And it becomes then the idea of the faith of God. For me, it means having the expectancy and the assurance of the outcome. The expectation and the assurance of the outcome is something like this. Now, we don't watch a lot of television, but Em and I, there was a television show that we had recorded on the DVR. And in case you don't know, Em was one of those people that talks back to the TV, or even at the movie sometime. But anyway, there was a show on a drama that we liked, and it was going on, and it was getting intense, and she was talking back at the screen. What's that all about? She was just going on and everything. And she was getting really excited and really animated, and I was sitting there. The show went on, and she was just getting all worked up, and then the commercial, we fast forward and everything, get to the next part, and a couple of times she kind of stood up and readjusted herself, because she really got into it, she was really talking. And I just sat there calmly, and after a while, she sat there, and then she turned and looked at me and said, "How can you be so calm?" And I said, "Well, baby, before you got home, I'd already watched the show." So I already knew what was going to happen. It's about having the assurance, having the expectation, despite what might be happening about the outcome. And so then God when we start talking in that way, when we are that way, then it helps us to understand that, one of the key scriptures of New Thought is where the master teacher Jesus says, "It is done unto you as you believe." It is done unto you as you believe. It's about that expectation again. It's about that understanding again. It's about that awareness again. And so it then starts back again to where I talked about last week, that our concept and our idea of God becomes so important, because people say, well, John, how is it then that in the midst of all of this that I can have this sense of expectation and this sense of assurance about the outcome? And it all goes back to, again, our understanding of the nature of God. And as I said before, when we try to describe God, we cut God down and limit God. But if we could just for a moment move into the idea that God is not a noun that is someplace that is objectified, but God is a verb, and it says that God is experience. God is experience. And just to give you an idea of that, when, I could talk about this as a piece of paper. I meant to have something else. And it's just a noun, it's paper, it's something like that, a person, place, or thing. But when I begin to do this, what happens? It's a thing. It's an action. Then it becomes transformed. It's an action. Something happens, and when that something happens, it's about a dynamic force. It's about an action. It's about something that is expressing itself. It's expressing itself. So when we begin to talk about the expectancy and the assurance of that, we begin to understand the nature of God as constantly doing, constantly loving. God is in love. God is loving, because love continues to express itself. Life continues to express itself. It continues to flow through us. And as we learn how to let it flow through us, we get into the divine flow, and we gain an understanding then of the nature of the way things work. We get into that place, into that space where we can allow it to happen. And Ernest Holmes asked in one of the first 4 chapters of The Science of Mind, how much faith or how much life can we have? And the answer is, as much as we allow ourselves to. Because what happens is we put limits on it. We get caught up in limitations. We get caught up in race consciousness. We get caught up in the thinking that there's only so much. And we don't understand that life is unlimited. It's limitless. And it continues to express itself. And God is limitless. And it expresses itself as you and as me and as those around us. And when we understand that, then when we start saying things that it's all God, that's what it really means, that it's all God, because it's life in expression. It's the spirit in expression. It's the force in expression. It's the universe, the love intelligence of the universe in expression, and it flows. And it reminds me of one of my colleagues, Paul Gagne in Atlanta, who told the story of how he walked out of his house one day, and he looked at the grass that was out there in his yard, and he felt a little ashamed because his neighbors, they've been watering their grass, and it looked a whole lot better, there in Atlanta, in one of those hot summers and everything. He decided that he needed to maybe start watering the grass, so he went back into the shed in the back of his house and found the sprinkler that he hadn't obviously used in a while. And he took it and he connected it up to the hose, and he turned the water on, and the sprinkler started spraying. And the thing that he noticed about the sprinkler was this: because he hadn't used it in a while and all of that, there were some parts where the flow was coming out and it was full, and it reached where it needed to, all the way to the edge of the yard. But there were some other places where the water barely came up and out of the sprinkler, and even some other places where it wasn't as strong as the others, but some of it came out. And he said it started to make him think about how we talk about this dynamic flow, just like the water that comes through, but those holes, because some of them had something blocking them, limiting them, that it didn't allow the full flow to come forth. It's the same way that when we limit ourselves or restrict ourselves, don't allow the full expression of faith, then that full expression of life that is asserting itself, that is expressing itself, that is pouring itself out, that is giving itself, that is showing itself, that is showing up as us, it becomes limited, not because it's holding anything back from us, but because we are holding back from it. So it becomes important. It becomes important in the expression of faith to have the expectation, to have the understanding of the type of universe that we live in. Morton Kelsey, who was an Episcopal priest and a psychologist, said that faith is the idea that the universe is kindly intentioned toward us. The universe is kindly intentioned toward us. It's the understanding that the universe is always saying yes. The universe is always expressing its love. The universe is always giving of itself. And it's like the proverb that says that faith is like the bird that is singing while it's still dark. Because there's something inside of it that already knows that while it might be dark on the outside, that the sunlight is on its way. It's something that allows it to understand that even in the midst of appearances and circumstances, the sunlight is on the way. And so when we talk about having the faith of God, it's about understanding that sunlight already is. It's expressing as you and it's expressing as me. And I love one of the things that Abraham talks about when they say the fact that we can have the understanding that there are so many things that happen around us and we may not like the way that it is at that moment, but people have said that once they look back and reflect on their lives, it's one of the best things that could have ever happened to them. So the idea then becomes that everywhere I am, I encounter good. No matter what it might look like at that moment, it's still good. Good things always follow me. Good things are always happening. And I begin to understand then at that moment that it's always working for my good. As Ernest Holmes says, that we remind ourselves that good is all around me. Good is expressing itself as me. It's expressing itself through me. I experience this good. I feel this good. I let this good flow. I understand it is who I am. And it is who you are. And when you begin to let yourself know that, to know that, and this week it was most important for me because one of my best friends on this earth was fighting for his life earlier this week in a hospital in Baltimore. And every day I sat with the knowing that in spite of what it looked like, he was on a respirator, and they were saying he wasn't going to make it, but despite all of the things that were being said about what was going to happen, I and so many other people held the space for him to know that the final outcome was going to be something positive. And this morning, his wife sent me a text and said, God is so good, he's off the respirator. He's laughing and shaking hands and trying to talk now. But it's that understanding. It's holding in that space and place, that faith that allowed in the midst of all of that to be able to say that all is well. All is well. And you have that faith. And I have that faith. We all have the faith of God. Because you're here. You're here. You showed up. You're expressing that faith